The Center for Hope Hospice and Palliative Care has a long and varied history, from its volunteer roots to a level of expertise that demands only highly qualified and trained staff in the field and in our 2 unique residential facilities. One thing has remained constant: a dedicated focus on quality, mission, and community. Alfred Sauer, the center's chairperson of the Board of Trustees, recently gave a brief history of the center.
Basically, the whole idea of the Center for Hope was the idea of Peggy Coloni and Father Hudson. They both, at the time, were working at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, which is now Trinitas. Peggy was an oncology nurse, and Father Hudson was the chaplain. And they saw a need for hospice-type services. And so they went out and started performing those services. In fact, they did it before there was a Center for Hope. They also were assisted in that by Dr. Wegrin, who was also a surgeon who was a doctor affiliated with St. Elizabeth's as well.
You really want to reach out and try to make them as comfortable as possible. And that's what we try to do in hospice. No matter how much time they have left, we try to make it quality time, try to make them comfortable, try to make them cheerful.
Initially, they had a small office on Morris Avenue in Union, Dr. Goodkin's office, that he let them use to operate out of. Then in 1983, they actually formally incorporated Center for Hope Hospice. They were all volunteers who would go out to people's houses and take care of them. In fact, turns out that my father was one of the early people taken care of. In 83 and 84, they were coming to my father's house and taking care of him as volunteers. After my father died in 84, my sister, who had been the primary caregiver, said to Father Hudson, "Look, you've done such a great job. I really want to do something. You know, what is it that you guys want?" Well, she says, "But really, what do you really want?" And at that point they said, "Well, our dream is to have a place where we can bring patients who can't be taken care of at home." And so my sister said to them, "Well, supposing we give you our house."
And at Sauer House, going back in 1989, we did not have any facilities at that time. So we only had home patients, and one of them included my mom, and that's how I got involved with the Center for Hope. So the nurses were really, out of Sauer House, were really mostly out in the field, and they would just basically come back and chart.
In the next year, the Center for Hope would be offered a lease on a vacant building in Scotch Plains. The lease was for $1 a year. Acadia House, as it was called, was soon renovated. Originally, it was hoped that the home could be used as a residential facility for patient care.
That's when Father Hudson learned about neighbors who don't want you in their backyard. People vilified him. It was like AIDS had just started becoming prevalent. People were saying, "You're going to bring AIDS patients in here, and then we're going to catch it from them," and all kinds of stuff that they didn't want any part of the center expanding to there. Well, we did get the approval from the Scotch Plains Zoning Board, but it turned out it wasn't feasible to make it into a residential facility.
Acadia House would become the center's grief and bereavement center until it was closed in 2011. In the meantime, the center staff was slowly outgrowing Dr. Goodkin's donated office space. The offices were moved to what used to be the convent for St. Elizabeth's Church on Hussa Street in Linden.
After Sauer House, we rented out Hussa Street, the Center for Hope Hussa Street, from St. Elizabeth's Church, and we grew bigger as we hired more nurses. We expanded, the care that we were given. And in Hussa Street, we stayed there for a few years, and it was originally a convent for the nuns at St. Elizabeth's. We stayed there in spiritual department, finance, marketing, volunteers.
When we were at Hussa Street, all the staff was based out of that office. The nurses came in, all the administrative staff was there, so it was a close-knit family. The building was cold in the winter and hot in the summer. made things interesting. But their goal was to expand from the beginning.
Peggy and Father Hudson still wanted a place where they could house patients. In 1990, they were able to lease a property at the Benedictine Academy in Elizabeth. It would be called Theo House. It could handle 8 patients at any given time. It would become the first licensed residential facility for hospice patients in New Jersey.
In 1990, they got their first realized dream, so to speak. They got a house that was located on the grounds of the mother house for Benedictine Academy. And it used to be the novitiate, and it was a small house, but it had room for 7 or 8 patients. And so they converted that into an in-house hospice and took patients there.
Father and Peggy always wanted to do more than home care for our patients. And we started small, at Theo House. They renovated it, when we were there. And it was interesting because before it got completed, the infirmary at the Benedictine Academy collapsed. And what we did at that point, we took all these elderly nuns in, even though it wasn't residential yet, and we set them up and we took care of them even before we started taking care of hospice patients there. Each day I was there, even though I was in the finance department, I watched how our staff would give so much of themselves, and they would treat, it no matter who we were, they would treat the patients with such kindness and compassion. And I always felt I had that firsthand because they took care of my mom for 10 days. And it's funny because you think strangers are coming in, you don't know who they are, but it leaves a lasting impression and a memory. And I always felt that I wanted to be in a place where I was able to help people and watch people, and the enjoyment each day you get out of seeing our staff care for the patients and care for each other. And that's what I think makes us so different from other places.
The house was very important. It allowed us to take care of patients who didn't have primary caregivers or family members who could devote 24 hours. And so it meant a lot to have a comfortable place for them to be.
But what they were finding is that 7 or 8 rooms wasn't cutting it. They had more demand than they had room for people, and they wanted another place. Well, in the meantime, we had been talking to the Township of Cranford. Township of Cranford had a piece of land on Orange Avenue next to the phone company building, and they had said to Father, look, if you open a hospice facility there, we'll give you the land. And so we started making plans for what buildings would look like and so on. And in the meantime, somebody discovered that somebody in Cranford in the clerk's office had put the property in on a list with the state as being green acres. Once it's green acres, you can't do diddly. They found out that that was a mistake, and so they had to go to the state for a process to try to get the green acres thing eliminated. In the meantime, some taxpayer in Cranford wasn't happy about that, so they took it all to court. So it's in court for years. And in the meantime, the dream to open this facility is just sitting on hold.
As the property in Cranford seemed like less and less of a possibility, the center was offered the Home for Aged Women in Elizabeth, also known as Heritage House, free of charge, but with a single condition. The center had to guarantee that they'd take care of the remaining residents.
There was a big buzz about having the facility. We were very excited about it. The renovations were going on. I did not get to see it until I started visiting patients there, and it was such a warm environment, and so it really was a home away from home.
Peggy's and Father's dream was we not only wanted it for our patients, we wanted our facilities to be also family orientated. So we added on from the kitchen on. There was no elevator, there was no chapel, there was no back room or anything, which we use now. So there was a lot of renovations, a lot of funds were put into it, and we got it the way we wanted it to be.
Father Hudson House, in obtaining that building, meant a world. It really gave us the opportunity to really believe that we could grow even bigger It was a validation that we were headed in the right direction, that it was a need that we could fulfill. And so the dream started to become a reality.
With the Cranford property still tied up in court, the center decided to abandon those plans and focus on turning Heritage House into a world-class facility. Renovations began quickly. Father Hudson found an anonymous donor to put up $1 million for improvements and to care for the remaining residents.
But lo and behold, in January of '97, Father Hudson dies. He was only 61 years old, I think, at the time. It was really a shock. And so then the name got changed to Father Hudson House in his honor.
I was in the building when it was announced that Father Hudson had passed away. Peggy Coloni and Father Hudson were the heart and soul of the center. And for a little while, it seemed like the heart stopped beating. Until you realize that it drove us to strive even harder for what their dream was. Their enthusiasm, Peggy's and Father Hudson's enthusiasm and dedication was infectious.
Well, Barbara McCutcheon is a friend of mine. We were in nursing school together. And she called me and she said, what would you think of the idea of having an auxiliary in Father Hudson's name? So I called Peggy and she was very happy about it. So we decided we would meet for lunch. So we met for lunch at Echo Lake and we started planning how this was going to happen. So we would have our meetings once a month, and then Barbara thought it would be a good idea to have a major fundraiser. So that's when the craft fair started at Mindawaskan Park. That was all outdoors, and that was a lot of organization. So after a few years, we thought we would try something that was a little bit on a bigger scale. And when we started the fashion show at La Fair, in the beginning we had over 500 people coming to that. And most of the people were so amazed and taken by the baskets. They had never seen anything like that. So from year to year, then we got people that just were supporters. You know, the Center for Hope has helped so many families, and the families were grateful for that. So I think we got a lot of support from the families.
The center's auxiliary continues to this day. In addition to various fundraisers throughout the year, the fashion show continues to be their hallmark event. Since its inception, the auxiliary has raised over $1.5 million, benefiting the patients and families of the Center for Hope.
Then comes, 2002, 2003, where we have a backlog again at Father Hudson House, don't have enough room for people. And so we've been looking around and looking around for more land to acquire to build another place. And lo and behold, Peggy and Father found this place. And it was a diner then, it was a Park Place Diner. They signed a contract to buy it, contingent upon our getting an approval to be able to build Peggy's house. We spent a couple of years with plans and applications for variance again to Scotch Plains in order to be able to build this. And Peggy was intimately involved in those plans. Father Hudson was. I was involved in those plans. A lot of people were involved. And lo and behold, Peggy dies.
We knew that the end was going to be coming. We knew her diagnosis. And I think it drove us, just like when Father died, it drove us to really get the place moving.
Well, with Peggy, there was more notice. I mean, Peggy had cancer, and we knew that. And I actually said to Peggy, "How are you dealing with this?" And she said to me, "I'm just living what I tell my patients." So her courage was just unbelievable. It just continued on. I think it was almost more of a desire because to honor Peggy.
I'm glad she was alive when she knew that the property was bought. It was a fulfillment of a dream. They wanted another facility in the other end of the county to service more people. Father Hudson House was filled. There was always a waiting list, and the need was just growing at that time.
She ended up dying in 2003 before this building across the way was ever constructed. We spent a number of years trying to raise money, capital campaign, and so on. Finally, it got started in 2006, so 3 years after she died, but before we even got a spade in the ground.
Each day we watched them break ground for, Peggy's house, and we looked forward to watching it each week, how much it has changed. And we were eager, and the plans that were being made, and the thoughts and the caring that was put into it made a difference for all of us. Even though we were office people, we were still a part of the construction being built. And that was a dream that meant so much for, Peggy and Father.
In 2008, Peggy's house opened to what you see it is today.
Peggy's house became a unique, state-of-the-art freestanding residential facility offering its guests a truly home-like setting. Each resident has their own private room with an ensuite bath, with expert staff on site 24 hours a day. It was built with the needs of both patients and families in mind, with sweeping views of its natural surroundings, various common areas for families to enjoy, guest suites for family overnight stays should the need arise, and every amenity possible to help its residents remain as comfortable as possible.
After the facility was built, they had a grand opening, and a lot of politicians and other people were invited that walked us through this journey that was so important to all of us at the Center for Hope. And it was a very large event, and again, once that ribbon was cut, even today, it's just a very special place.
Everybody was very excited, and the ribbon was cut. Photographers were here. The tent was full of everybody. Everybody was in a great mood, and as we toured through the facility, everybody was in amazement how beautiful it was. The grounds, the furnishings, the color, the layout. It was just a real tribute to Center for Hope to have such a beautiful building.
It was a bittersweet celebration. Peggy wasn't with us, but her dream was being fulfilled, and so that was really nice to see that fulfillment for her.
Peggy Coloni's house was really way ahead of its time because really nobody else offered such services in the facility. We did have Theo House at the time, and we had Father Hudson House, but this was a whole new concept, a whole new contemporary look to hospice industry.
Center for Hope was one of the first hospices to open in the state of New Jersey. back when hospice was merely a volunteer program and a dream. We were innovators then, we are innovative now. We remain committed not only to the charitable care, but also to the high quality of hospice care. That's our hallmark, and we're looking to bring that into the future and continue to be an innovative and productive member of the community and work in partnership with those around us.